Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan. Usually, the guests who are often nominated will grab coffee with me in person, as I have here. But today is a little different. Before I introduce a very special guest, 10,000 miles away from Cambridge, I wish to thank you for engaging with this new passion project of mine on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. As of this morning, there has been over 700 downloads, and it is so great to hear your feedback. Please do message me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn if you would like to nominate a guest. So joining Coffees on Me, David Quan today is Chirath Lekamge. Chirath is the school captain of St. Peter's College, Adelaide, South Australia, during the college's 175th anniversary in 2022. Having moved around rural Victoria during primary school, Chirath joined the college in 2016. Having graduated from St. Peter's, affectionately known as Saints, in 2021, that was last year, Chirath accepted an offer to study medicine at the University of Adelaide, an offer he deferred until 2023 after receiving the invitation to return to Saints in 2022 this year as school captain. Placing a strong emphasis on positive college culture in 2022, Chirath advocates for inclusivity and diversity, whilst holding the values of introspection and perspective very highly to achieve success as a collective, not just as an individual. Attributes he credits his upbringing as an only child to. In his spare time, Chirath is a fan of Formula One, enjoys building things with his father, playing badminton, and is a keen drummer who loves all music. Having performed in big bands and rock bands, he's raring to continue his musical endeavours in more pop or funk genres during university in 2023. Chirath, in all honesty, I'm feeling quite emotional, and it's with a lot of nervousness and excitement that I welcome you to my podcast, Coffees on Me, David Quan.
Thanks so much for having me, David. It's certainly something that I'm not necessarily used to, but with things we're doing at Saints, with things like Saints Radio, I'm not too out of touch with having a mic in front of me. But it's lovely to see you. It's been a long time since we've spoken, but it's fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad to have kept up a bit with your journey via Instagram and text, but so nice to actually see you in person, albeit virtual.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're approaching the final few days of term one holidays. How's that going?
Yeah, so we've got T-minus 3 days until term 2 kicks off, and that's why I'm in winter uniform, which is blazer tie. So we've got the first thing up at the start of term 2 is our Anzac Day ceremony that we're doing. So there's a couple of things I've been in for this week just to make sure those logistics are all in place so that we're good to go come Tuesday, which is when we start.
That's wonderful. We will obviously get into the school stuff, which is really, really interesting. But I want to start with yourself. You may not remember this, but we were outside the Pentry Fielding. I think that would have been 2016. And I asked you, what did you do as a little kid? And you mentioned that you made a lot of stop motion Lego videos. Do you remember that? And was that true? Did I remember correctly?
I'm very impressed. I'm not sure how you've managed that. Yeah, when I was very young, I that's also part of being an only child, because I found creative new ways to entertain myself and to make toys a more fun thing. So as a little kid, one thing I'd do is I'd grab an iPad that one of my mum or dad had and would take photos and use an app to just stitch them all together and make small stop motion films. And just the other day, actually, I was trying to find some of them. And I know I would cringe so much if I watched any of them again, because they'd just be my young voice in the background animating these Lego characters. But yeah, definitely. I don't know how you've managed that. Well done. Good memory.
Well, you were a very good video editor and always been very creative. And I think we also had a chat about the idea of a story, how people are moved by stories and narratives, and it's all about how you portray things. What other hobbies did you have as a child, and why don't you just give a brief overview of who you are, but we will delve more into it.
Yeah, as a child, and it's almost a carryover into my adolescence as well. I was always really quite good at writing and reading, and not in the sense of just pure literacy in school, but more in the sense of just really enjoying writing short stories, or understanding the different perspectives that you learn from storybooks as a kid. So in terms of what I was like as a child, I really did enjoy that element of it. And I was always into fantasy films and all of these different things. So I was your typical little kid.
Mm.
And then throughout that element of my childhood, I just kept on developing my love for language. And
Mm.
even when it came to, secondary education, English was always one of my strongest subjects. It was my strongest subject at the end of year 12. So that's really come a long way for me. And I really find value and meaning in being able to put your ideas down on a page and
Mm.
being able to communicate that effectively. Because if that becomes a barrier, then it's a barrier to a lot of meaningful change. And it's especially as a young man, we often keep a lot of things up in our head. And I think it's really therapeutic as well to get things out, whether that's verbally or writing it down. So it was almost as a bit of an escape from reality to me at sometimes, or more recently, a better way to rationalize what I'm feeling. So I think that's something that I've held on to for a long time. Yeah.
Right, right. And rural Victoria, where were you?
Mm. I was in Mildura and Horsham. So I was in Mildura for about 4 years, and then came back to Adelaide, and then went to Horsham for about a year and a half. So that was my journey in rural Victoria. I was born here in Adelaide, and then moved off for my parents' work, and was in small schools over there, which I still really, really hold very fondly. It was a big difference coming to St. Peter's after that, for
Massive.
sure. But I think, you know, if anything, that just made the experience even better.
We will come back to your childhood. I just wanted that little bit of context to start. But in St. Peter's, we all know that the school captains are, a year 13 position. So you graduate, you have your academic results. But here you are wearing school uniform, even though your peers, most of them are first year university. For those
Yeah.
who aren't familiar with the Saints kind of way of doing things, why don't you give a brief overview of how the system works?
So the way that school captaincy works at St. Peter's is effectively you're deemed as not necessarily a student and not necessarily a staff member. And captains of the past, and if you've been in that position, have described it as you're kind of holding onto two pillars, and you're the rope that ties the two together, in a way. And in that way, you operate in a very interesting field because you've graduated, you've done year 12, you've had the extent of the Saints' journey, and now you're experiencing it again in a very weird light. It's almost as if you wear the uniform, but you're not a student, but yet you're not a staff member. So in and of that self, it presents a challenge as to, okay, how do I navigate this field? But I think the beauty of that is it's so open-ended that you can really make it what you want to make it. And together as a team, myself and the exceptional Aidan Hughes, who is the school vice captain this year,
He is exceptional, I can confirm.
he's I could not have asked for a better captain
Both
to
of
do
you,
this job
both
with.
of you are wonderful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, David. But no, seriously, I think we make a great team, and I'm indebted to his open-mindedness, and he's so keen to get on with the year and to be just a fantastic leader. So that's school captaincy at Saints. It is a year 13 position, and it involves taking the gap year. So you're not actually studying any tertiary things during that time.
Very holistic description. The amount of time that I've had to describe it to people here in Cambridge, but it's very hard. I think even when they say it, you just don't get it, and that's totally reasonable because it's quite a unique thing. I'm quite sure we're the only school in the world that does that.
Yeah.
So you're now a term in, and that's 10 weeks. And I have been trying to follow a little bit. And something you have been trying to do is the Captain's Cup. Is that right?
Yeah.
Captain's Cup.
So I think the initial idea for this came from the Captain's Challenges, which came along in 2020. So I think a year after you had left. And this was about the onset of COVID in Adelaide. And the idea was from the captains of 2020 was that we gave a challenge to the students of the school something that they could do at home during lockdown, and then could submit it to the captains, and they would judge them in house groups to be able to still be intertwined with the school community while you're at home. And what we've kind of evolved that to in 2022 is that we have a series of captain's challenges, which we'll do in school, but boys can choose to do them at home, film themselves, or send the submissions into their house captains. And then it all leads up points wise to the Captain's Cup, which is a recreational inter-house trophy that is centered around house spirit, positive culture, not, it's very low stakes, right? It's very accessible for students. You don't have to be an athlete to do it or incredibly talented in a certain field. Just me as average old Chirath can just go ahead and submit a video, and it will still count immensely to the points at the end of the day. So it's a low volatile, really accessible way for students to be able to still compete, but in a very fun way that's really conducive of house spirit. And for context, St. Peter's has 10 houses, which is also slightly unusual. And I think I couldn't imagine it any other way though, because it works like clockwork the way that we have the 10 houses. So the competition we have in between them is fantastic. And I think the Captain's Cup sits within that field. And it's something that Aidan and I are really going to push in the next term.
Tell me more about the house system at St. Peter's College, and how much pride do people put into their houses? And I know you obviously agree with me that Hawke's house is the best house, but go on, Chirath.
Rubbish. Listen. Hawke's house is a brilliant house. As school captain, I can't say anything bad about any of the houses. But I do have a slight bias towards Farrell House, which is the house that I'm from. House pride at St. Peter's, it defines your journey, I think. I still wear this pin here is from Farrell House, and I have a tie pin that you can't quite see. That's also from Farrell House. On my blazer, there's purple anointments on it, which is the color of Farrell House. So everywhere you look and see, there's house something. And students are allocated into a house at year 7. And then in year 9, students are put directly into what's known as the vertical pastoral care system, which is where students in year 9 will interact with students all the way from year 9, 10, 11, and 12 in one home group or mentor group. So, and that all happens within the house. So effectively, your journey all the way from year 7 through to 12, you're around the same head of house. You're around house captains and house leaders year in, year out. And your fellow mates who are usually from the same house will carry on into senior years. And especially from year 9 to 12, that becomes really important because that's your home group. Your mentor group is your house group. And it's just, I reminisce on swimming carnival last year, being year 12s. And, for most of us, it was our final year at the school, and supporting the house was, the thing to do. You'd be chanting your lungs out. You'd be wearing your top with pride. You'd be getting the younger boys enthused about it. And I think it's a very, very beautiful thing. I think we take it for granted on a day-to-day basis because we're swept up in the competition. We're swept up in, let's do this trials for athletics or these trials for swimming carnival, or where are our debating boys? The debates, at lunchtime against Hawke's House. So there's so many things that get swept up in the day-to-day at St. Peter's, and it's a very busy place. But if you stop to think about why you're doing it and the beauty of having a little family amongst 1,000 kids in the senior school, it's just a little place where you can fully be yourself and have people around you that care for you, and all have a very common vision to help the house thrive and to help the individuals in the house thrive. So that's my perspective of it. I think it's fantastic, and I'll always be a Farrell Old Scholar for life, and I'll wear this pin with pride, that's for sure.
Beautifully articulated, Chirath. And I in reflection, and even when I was at Saints, I think I agree with you that one of the best parts about the school is as soon as you enter, you can forge such close relationship with people from all different year levels.
Exactly.
As a year 8, you come, or year 7, year 8, you come into the middle school, you get to know the year 12 house captains, you get to know the year 11s, and gradually as you grow up, then you kind of consume that leadership duty. And I think there's some kind of beauty in people paying it forward and always giving to the next generation. And I think it's a very, very inclusive culture, and sounds like what you're doing with the Captain's Cup, you're adding an element of fun to it, which is really good. Which house are currently on top?
At the moment is, I can check for you. At the moment, the leader is Farhouse. They're on 10 points after challenge one. It was very close between DaCosta, who was second, and it was, for me and Aiden to figure that out, it was basically a coin toss. But
Right.
yeah, Farhouse.
That's wonderful. Good on you for elaborating on the captain's challenges and kind of building upon that. The next big project, which is the one that really captured my attention, I think it's very creative, is the Saints Student Association.
Yes, yeah. You've been reading our magazine articles, I see, our newsletters.
As I do my research.
I always wondered whether that went anywhere, but clearly it does.
You have at least one reader.
Okay, great. I'll let Aiden know because we both collaborate on those. So, yes, the Saints Student Association. That's probably going to be our biggest project this year, unless we think of something radical in the next 2.5 terms. But the Saints Student Association is effectively a structure that allows us to unify our clubs and societies in the school. And it also allows a very formalized way for students to have student voice. So it's taken us 6 months, almost to the dot, to get this stuff planned out. We started, the proposal came out in December, January, because we had started a little earlier. We'd started at the end of 2021 in these roles. Usually captains start at the start of the year. We started term 4, 2021, which gave us about 6 weeks of just ideation, of just what do we want next year to be? What's our vision? And then we were met with a lot of roadblocks during term 1 with getting a student association set up. We quite underestimated the task and underestimated what it was like to set almost a governing body up to structure all clubs and societies. We just thought, oh yeah, walk in the park. It's just a proposal and it'll get done. But I think we learned the hard way that if you want to do anything meaningful, it does take time, and it does take a lot of barriers have to be broken to do it. Like, it was something new that Saints hadn't seen. So there was a lot of discussion necessary. There was a lot of clarifying what our intentions were, what we projected it would be in 10 years' time, for example. So in 2022, we're hoping to unveil it in week 2 this term. So not next week, the week after, the Student Association. And effectively, we've recategorized all of our clubs and societies into 4 categories, which is faculty-led, competition-based, cultural, and a project-based, which is the 4th one. And so those 4 categories we think are pretty all-encompassing to all the club societies we have. And what that gives us, which we had in the past but wasn't as clear, was a very, very clear direction as to what this club is. Like, if we took, for example, the Reconciliation Committee, right? That's listed right now as a cultural society. And although its portfolio expands beyond being a society, students know very clearly, okay, this society focuses on culture, on positive culture, and on how we can learn more about being better global citizens, right? And then you have project-based societies, which under its category, something like Huntington's disease awareness group would fall right in. So back when David Quan was here, the leader of that club in 2018, that would have fallen under what we now categorize a project-based society, because you're meeting regularly, but you have a vision at the end to create a product or an event, so a project. So very, preliminarily, that's its goal, to provide more incentive for students to join societies. And now we've now got the facilities through the society to do something that we haven't done before, which is to allow students to very directly create their own clubs and societies. So they can simply fill out a form on the new homepage Aiden and I have made. And then through that, we'll get a message and we'll go to our head of sports and PE and co-curriculars, and we'll have a meeting with them to say, okay, Johnny from year 9, that's a fantastic idea to have a ham and cheese toasty club, right? Let's find the resources for it. Let's find the room for it and get it going. Because even if it is 1 or 2 boys or 3 boys in that club, they've got their niche and they've got the space where they feel at home and they're doing something they really enjoy in their free time during recesses and lunchtimes at school. So we thought that vision was very powerful to give every student an opportunity to firstly find a place where they can fit in as an individual, or create that place very directly. And I think we're very excited for the way that it's going to go. And we're very excited to see what it becomes in years to come. And I think it'll be a really powerful legacy for us to leave. And there's a lot of work to it, though. There'll be a huge amount of things to do in term 2 to get it working like clockwork. We'll announce it, but there'll be lots of emails, students asking, what's this new thing? And it'll be a slow burner, but it will be a good one, I hope.
It's amazing, Chirath. Saints is obviously a community that means a lot to me, and part of the reason why it has meant a lot to me is the people there who have supported me, and also the opportunities that I've had, the holistic education. And I think setting something up and giving boys an opportunity to show initiative, to show creativity, to be involved, and to make friends, I think that would be a tremendous legacy that you and Aidan can leave in your captaincy year. So I want to talk a bit more about the categories. So the first group is faculty-based. Second is competition-led. Is that right?
Yeah, a competition, yeah.
Yeah. And then the third one is
we've got cultural,
and then the fourth one is project-based.
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you give me two examples of two societies that fit into each, just so I make sure I'm on the same page?
No worries. So let's think faculty-led, right? So directly you'd think of something like maths at Saints and science at Saints, two booming societies, which are directly faculty-led. Project-based, at the moment, we can think of something like Exploration Society and the AV Society, who both have kind of goals in mind, different mini projects that they're going on. Competition-based, we can think of something like the SACLO Society, which is the South Australian Computational and Linguistics Olympiad. So that's a competition that students can enroll to do, but takes place on a club society level. And then we also have something like public speaking, which is also a competition in South Australia.
Okay. I really like the framework. Yeah. And I was wondering, when you set this framework up, is it just to encompass all the societies at Saints, or are you trying to encourage boys to tick the boxes of, they should try out each of them?
So the idea is that by categorizing it, it gives students on face value by looking at the club, what is the club about? So it's an accessibility, clarity kind of thing, but it's also existing as an incentive for boys to do what they love, to do what they enjoy. If they enjoy things that are directly from their faculty, for example, if you're a whiz at maths and want to extend yourself or want to help other kids, go to Maths at Saints, right? You'll fit in right there. Or if you're someone who really enjoys problem solving and ideating, go to a project-based society and start something up, or go to one that exists. So it's an avenue for boys to find something very specific that they like, but that's still broad enough for them to explore multiple things. But it also gives them the opportunity to incentivize themselves to try one of each thing, for example. Oh, I want to do a competition one and a cultural and a project and a faculty one. I've ticked all the boxes. So it kind of is two birds with one stone in that regard.
So I asked that because, Chirath, when I think about your Saints journey, you're very much someone who always went above and beyond, and in many cases ticked the boxes. I believe that you played tennis and table tennis and did debating. You were a part of the Huntington's projects, which we will talk about a bit more. You were a part of the Reconciliation Committee, if I remember correctly. I think you were helping with Boys Feed, the magazine, before it kind of died down, School Magazine.
Yeah, that was 2016, goodness.
That was 2016. And what else? Is that all? Have I missed out on anything that you have been involved on? Because I'd love to elaborate more on your growth as a person through the school, because it's a wonderful community.
You've covered a lot there. What else was there? So there was debating, and I was lucky enough to be captain of debating in 2021 as year 12. There was Reconciliation Committee, which I led in year 12, and that's one of the places that I called home for a long time, and I'm still learning today.
Actually,
There's
I remember you did some volunteering thing at Port Augusta for medicine. Is that right? As
Yes,
well.
so it was it
Project?
was yeah, it was a bit of work experience which wouldn't help me in my career aspirations. It was
Yeah.
also a way for me just to understand a little bit more about the background of reconciliation and such. So there was that, and then there was Pride at Saints as well, which is a society.
Mm.
Um, what else was there? I think you've about covered all of it.
Great, great. So when you entered the school, Chirath, you walked into Pentrith as a middle year student. What was your attitude? What were you trying to get out of this place? Were you intimidated by the opportunities? Were you excited? Walk me through your attitude.
So I distinctly remember sitting on Main Oval as a year 7 on our lead-in day, and I was surrounded by kids I'd never met before and never knew, and it was very overwhelming, right? And mainly because my background in primary school was from very small schools. The cohort of year 5 would have been 25 kids who were in your class. That was the cohort.
Wow.
And the oval was a third covered in dust in the middle of Victorian outback, right? And I remember going to my mum before coming to St. Peter's and saying, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm going to get lost. It's too big. And, I'm a very small person. So even in year 7, I was very intimidated by just the sheer size of the place. But what comes with that is also me realizing, and I realized this very early on in year 7, that this place is special, and it's a place that not many people get to access. And firstly, that's a shame, and secondly, I need to then make the most of it so I can use those skills and pay it forward later in wider society. So at year 7, I was like, I need to make the most of this. I've got 6 years, but those 6 years are going to go like this. So I just signed up to lots of things, and I was very hesitant at first, and I was trying to make friends and see what they were doing, and then just follow them along, see what the house captains in Farrell were saying and the house leaders who I looked up to. And it was a slow start as to getting my foot into all of these different avenues. But once I did, it was just gun ho from there out.
The framework we used at Saints, I'm not sure if that's still the case, was the SMART goals. And I remember boys had a SMART goal for academics, a SMART goal for extracurricular, a SMART goal for well-being. You may not remember the exact goals that you had, but what were the goals you had in academics, extracurricular, and well-being?
As a year 7?
Year 7, 8, middle school, just starting off, your Saints career.
I think academics would have been definitely to get better at maths, because I was rubbish at it. I was rubbish at maths, and then I worked really hard in the end to try and to get myself up. But it would have been get better at maths. Well-being would have definitely been try to get your sleep schedule in check. I remember that was very important to me, and it was in year 12 as well. That's for sure. What was the other one you mentioned?
Extracurricular.
Yes, and that would have been I remember this, and that was to get better at serving in tennis, because I'm still rubbish at serving in tennis. But even back then, I was like, you have to be able to serve, because I always underarmed the ball. So that was my extracurricular goal, I think.
Who were your friends in your first year at Saints? Who did you hang out with at recess and lunch?
Yeah, so I remember, because they're still my close friends to this day. So it was Aidan Donovert, Josh Watson, Nivranshu Urkula, Chanadu Fernando. Who have I missed in that class?
Angad?
Angad came in year 8. So in year 8, yes, Angad Sohi. And then also in year 7, other boys like Josh Wilson. Yep. And I'm hoping I haven't missed any. Goodness, this is going to be bad. I don't think I've missed anyone. We'll see. I'll get an angry text message later if any of them watch this. So let's see if I remember. I'll let them know.
It's a wonderful friendship group, and I asked you because what do you think you learned from your friends, and how did you lean on your friends during a transition year? Because year 7, 8, we look back now and we go, it was a good time, but it can also be quite disorientating into a community like Saints. And with so much to handle, so much to learn, the expectations of not walking on the grass, and you're constantly on high alert. How did you rely on your friends, and what did you learn from them?
So I think I was very lucky because that year in 2016, it was one of the biggest intakes of new students to the school, because it was the first year that the new middle years building was made. So there was a huge influx. So most of my friends were new boys. So we were all in the same boat as to thinking, goodness, look at this place. Where do we go? What do we do? And then the boys who had come up from the junior school, for example, people like Niv, who knew the place a little better, even they were still, very, very much wondering what senior school life is like. So by virtue of these guys being all young 13-year-olds, wondering what's going on, it was very easy and comforting to not know what was happening and to then be confident enough to say that and to go and search for opportunities and to search what the place meant. So I think, and my friends have been fantastic in the sense that they all valued being themselves first, and they were looking for things that they enjoyed and people that they had similarities with. And I was very lucky that I found a lot of people who did have a lot of similarity with me. Whether it was in the smallest of areas, it was still a very big instigator for that friendship. And I reminisce on all of that really fondly. And I think that's what really helped me navigate Saint's life.
What were some of the challenges you had, say, before year 10 at Saints?
Before year 10?
Like for school? You
Yeah,
can't
right.
say math. Or
I was going to say, sorry? What
or
was
you
that?
can't say serving in tennis.
Okay, all right. Some of the challenges. I think initially I had an expectation of myself to find what fitting in meant instead of just directly being myself and trying to see where I fit. And that was no fault of anyone but my own. And I think one of the biggest challenges was, I was a lot smaller than everyone else. So speaking up was something that I needed to work on. But in year 7, I picked up very quickly because it was just such an accepting group, and everyone was in that same group and was learning at the same time. So one of the challenges that I'd probably think very early on was finding my feet to have the confidence to speak up. But then now they couldn't get me to shut up. So yeah, learning made.
Yeah. So in 2017, when you were in year 8, the school kind of underwent a period of transition with new leadership team and new vision. Were you able to notice the cultural changes of the school, or at that time did it not really affect you?
I think it did. During that period of time, I was invited to speak at the leaving headmaster's ceremony. I had to do the Bible reading. I was invited to do that as a year 8. And every bone in my body was telling me not to do it because I was too nervous. But then the word that came out of my mouth was, it'll be an honor. And I still remember talking to the then head of middle years, who asked me to do it. And from then on, this is more of a personal tangent, but by saying that, that changed my perspective on opportunities forever, on the way that just to say yes, even if every fiber in your being is telling you not to do it. And it turned out to be probably one of the best experiences when I reflect on it, because it made me grow a lot. I went up there and like butchered the Bible reading. I had like a spoon in my pocket and it was uncomfortable, and I missed like an entire line of it. But then afterwards, I was like, okay, I just did that. I'm year 8. This is pretty cool. But to answer your question more directly in terms of the change in culture, I think yes. I don't think I was around long enough before to see anything too drastic, but I think that there was such a huge push to find what the values of the school were. And those values were truth, respect, and service. These all encompassing 3 principles that became center to the life of a Saints boy. And the real push for students to embrace positive culture that's something that was palpable. And for someone like me who paid attention to those things, I thought that was brilliant. And I thought as I went along in senior years that was really great. So definitely, I think there was a change, and there was change for the better. And it was progressive change though. It's been going on for years, not just 2018. But I think it really came into action after that.
What a great anecdote. I didn't know you were nervous about speaking at the farewell assembly. And in fact, one of the sentences of Saints that really stuck with me goes something like, developing a boy's character is just as, if not more important, as fostering their intellect. And I think it's precisely those moments of you stepping up and those moments of you taking a risk and trying something new that you look back on and that has shaped your character. This idea of saying yes to opportunity. So every school captain, every teacher, every leader in their speeches emphasize the common themes of say yes, boys, to opportunities. There are so many opportunities at Saints. The holistic education here, we should be so grateful. And all of that is very true. And I think it's something that people seem to appreciate a lot more after they leave Saints. But
Oh yeah.
how have you found, or in fact, what do you think is the best way to communicate that message to middle school students so that they actually not only resonate with it, but actually take action? And perhaps you can lay on your own kind of journey to answer that.
I think it starts with being able to relate with the developmental stage they're in, and in the year level that they're in. As a year 10 student, you've kind of acclimatized to the place. You're going on to be a senior. You've found where your niches are, and you're working towards them. And trying something new is, something you will do if you really want to do it, but you're probably genuinely comfortable with the things that you're enrolling yourself in. As a year 7 and 8, that's not necessarily the case, right? You're just coming into this place. So it's very important that you acknowledge that. And I remember in my address at the start of the year, and you're definitely right in those very common themes because they just define our lives
But
so
it's so
very
true. That's
heavily.
why it's cliche. It is so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's unfair for us to say, oh, everyone mentions it, but we mention it because it's the truth. And I think the way that I spoke about it was the regret of not doing it hurts far more than the embarrassment and the fear to actually try it out.
Mm.
And I learned that the hard way. And that's a message that is something that I value, and that's something it's difficult for younger boys to probably comprehend. So the way that you kind of market that is to actually go see them and to speak to the younger boys and show them an incentive to do it. And it's really quite remarkable what it's like having a senior student come and talk to you as a year 7. They're almost like celebrities to you. And I know when you came around when I was just in year 8, I was like, oh my God, it's David Quan, right? And whether they were the prefects when I was in year 7 or whatever, just a senior boy talking to you showed that, there's connection here, right? I'm not just secluded here as a year 7. This place is, a moving piece of clockwork. And that's something that I think is really important. Those interactions is vital to get people out of their shells. And that's something, not just in a school setting, just in general as well. Having that very human conversation as to, this is scary. You might not be good at it, but it doesn't matter. Things like doing it will give you skills that you would not know you had, right? And, and in my address at the start of the year, I said, listen, I played badminton. I was in the Open C1 team. I was rubbish at it, right? But I just really loved playing badminton, and I kept up with it in year 12. So there's a lot of it that you have to put behind yourself as to thinking, I'm going to look really bad doing this, and just try it. And that's kind of easier said than done. But I think it's a very human thing to be able to communicate, and that needs to be communicated, that it's okay to be bad at things. And it's very okay to be bad at things and to then subsequently drop it. You don't have to be embarrassed to carry on with something that's draining you, but at least you know now that it's draining you. You wouldn't have known before. And heck, out of the blue, you might even find something that you're terrible at the start, but you find a love for, that you get better at. And goodness knows, here goes 3 years and you're, leading the thing, or you're one of the best people at it. So it all starts with being confident enough to say yes, which is very tricky. But I think if we get a lot more senior students getting involved with the younger boys to incentivize them, I think that's really key. But it's definitely something that's incredibly valuable at Saints to start to do young.
Beautiful message. Why did you sign up for my social entrepreneurship, the empathy and Huntington's project?
Well, I think it was just something new. It was something that, there was a lot of clubs and societies that existed. Some were just starting up. And then I think it was one of the very few clubs and societies that was very student driven and run by a student like yourself. So I think that was a very, again, seeing a senior student wanting to get involved with the middle years boys, that was like a real incentive for it and was something that I was interested in. But it also was very broad in terms of what the society wanted to achieve as well. Like we learnt as we went on and we found the roles as we went on. So it wasn't very intimidating. You weren't expected to have a skill set or expected to have an interest in anything. You just turned up and then it went from there. And I think that was very easy for boys to subscribe to because it wasn't, a hard pill to swallow by any means.
In that first session, I'm not sure if you remember, but we sat in a circle and we did activities such as, there was a whiteboard in the middle, we chucked the pen around and everyone kind of had to draw a shape that meant a lot to them or a drawing that meant a lot to them. We made that activity, I think I called it Dominoes of Actions, where the first time you all had a piece of paper and it was one after one, but you don't know what other people had and you just had to pay attention. So once you see A, then you do B, and then someone else would have, once you see B, you do C.
I remember this now.
So the first time we did it, we timed it, and I think it was an outrageous, like a 3-minute something. And then your group had a discussion. And after everyone kind of prepared, we cut down the time to like half a minute or something. So at that time, what do you think we as a group was trying to achieve?
I guess it was being better at, firstly, listening, and secondly, being more true to oneself as to being able to communicate who you are confidently, not having to drag that out, being succinct in doing so, but then being able to really quickly and really actively take on board other people's perspective and who other people are. And I think it was a really good team building exercise because it meant you had to listen to be, in that small time frame. And goodness, that was so long ago. I remember the whiteboard activity and I briefly remember this activity. But yeah, my recollection of it is not as clear as it was. But I think at its core, those elements were pretty important to it.
What I was trying to get at is being a part of a society at Saints is very much about not only you putting yourself forward, but the relationship that you have with other people. How have your involvement, for example, in that Huntington's group shaped your collaborative style and how you interact with other people? And
I think that
you feel like you've developed through a community like Saints.
Absolutely. I think that being in groups like that in general, firstly, you're around people who aren't experts, right? You're all there to learn. Yes, some people might have been in that society for longer, let's say. And in that way, intuitively, they have a bit of a leadership position. And I think broadly what that allowed me to do was to enter an environment where there were people who were going towards the same cause or they were trying to achieve something very similar. And then what that would allow you to look at and find out is, okay, we have a room full of 18 kids, all different kids, all trying to problem solve or create something. What are their individual skill sets that we can maximize and optimize as a group to actually fulfill the aim of the society? So very implicitly, and you don't realize this in the moment, but you realize you're really building really important teamwork skills and really learning how to take on different people's perspectives and their talents and actually find ways to engage them in ways that work together with how you are and your talents and the guy on your left and the guy on your right. So it's very implicit and you don't realize it, but it's a very good way, just generally clubs and societies, to work out ways to be inclusive and to work out ways to really change yourself as an individual to be more accepting of one another's and to find actively where you can put people into important places with yourself and work with them. So I think that was like the most beautiful part about it. And even in the end, it was really powerful for me.
I want to keep unpacking your experiences while doing extracurricular because, like we said, you can't just tell someone to join something. You have to make it resonate with them. And partly through this, I hope that any younger boy listening can really sense their school captain reflecting on one of their early experiences and how that have shaped them. So after those activities, for context, I'm talking about this project because we have a shared memory on this.
Yeah.
You were divided up into 4 groups, and you were in group 3. In fact, you and Aidan were in the same group, so I think that's beautiful.
Usually, really? Oh, all right, great.
Yeah, you two were in the same group, and the challenge of each group was you had to prepare a pitch of an idea that will help our vision, which went something along, educating the community about Huntington's and to promote empathy, etc. I can't remember the exact wording.
Yeah.
In that process of creation, so you were at year 8, you were with other year 8 students, there were no teachers guiding you, and there you are needing to come up with an idea, a business idea, a social entrepreneurship idea to make a real tangible difference to the community. And I think I sold it to you guys as you're going to have to present it in front of school leadership, which I can imagine would have been quite daunting as a year 8 student. Do you remember much of that process? And if so, how did you all come to the brilliant pitches that you presented?
I remember very clearly doing the pitches because some of them were quite funny. And we had a big TV screen in one of the rooms downstairs in Pentreath, facing Main Oval. And we had boys pitching things. And I think, fundraising with donuts was mentioned, which was the final idea in the end. And I think as a collective, as this little group of year 8s who have now been told that they have to present in front of senior school leadership to an idea, we're all thinking, okay, we have to now actually think about something and not just muck around a little bit. But I think at its core, and this goes to any club society and any kind of initiative that boys will subscribe to, it starts with what your aim is. And for us, that was made very clear very early on. And that was raising awareness for Huntington's disease and supporting the Day Family Foundation. And so that was our starting point, and that's a general starting point for a lot of people. What's the end goal? What is the tangible result we want to see? And then everything is about finding the critical paths as to achieving that. And there were creative ways to do that. And then it was just a lot of brainstorming, what works at Saints, right? Casual clothes days are big selling items. Food and drink is absolutely golden for fundraising. But then at its core, it's not just about selling these products. We want the awareness there as well. So how can we do these things in a way that represents the cause? And those considerations were always made. So it was a lot of just talking about it, ideating. And it was very good that the boys, they were very mature and it was very easy to have those conversations. And I think with that comes a challenge as well as to how do we now think on a very big scale on a school-wide activity. So that was just generally our mindset as we went along with it. But it was definitely what's the end goal and what do we have to do to achieve it? And what creative way can we twist to win the vote at the end during the pitch?
For me, I was obviously very passionate about the project, and when I tried to build it, I kept in mind the positive impact that we could be having with Mr. Wilson and the family and the community. But what really the main takeaway for me throughout that project, and it was, more than a term, in fact, 2 terms, was if you trust younger students, even though they're 12, 13, and if you give them an opportunity to lead, to create, to make mistakes, and to communicate their thoughts, it was incredible. The ideas that you guys came up with, the cost benefit tables that I remember, the
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't know if you remember the plastic bag challenge where I pulled it out.
I still,
How
I
can,
still remember completely messing that one up. That was so funny. But I remember it. Yeah.
but it just amazed me at how much you guys had to offer. And I just want to ask, Chirath, were you surprised at how much you and your peers had to offer? Because as a year 11 student, I didn't, in all honesty, expect a group of Yates to be able to run their entire logistics of a fundraiser, to contact vendors and to book things and to prepare the pitch and make the awareness video. Like, it was a lot of work that even, for uni students, that's quite a lot.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to unlocked potential, right? Even still, year 7 and 8 is a period of your life where there is so much growth you can have, and there's so much you have to offer, but there often needs a spark to light the fire. Yeah. And which is why I'm such an advocate for clubs and societies, because that's what it gives you. Yeah. Subscribing to this random club will make you think in ways you didn't think you could. So I think definitely, I mean, we didn't know how to run a fundraiser. We were learning that on the road.
People listening to the podcast may not see, but the video, can you see the photo? There's you there.
Yeah. I remember that that was on Athletics Day, right?
Yep. And there was you right there in your purple Farrell top.
Go Farrell.
And the reason why I kept that photo there, Chirath, is quite frankly that you guys really inspired me. It reminds me every day that when you trust someone, even teenagers, they can surprise you, and everybody wants to do something to contribute to the wider community. And I think that was one of my highlights of my schooling, and I want to take this opportunity, Chirath, to thank you for being a part of it, and in fact, a very, very big part of it, because you were always reaching out, you were always emailing, messaging, clarifying things, and you volunteered to edit the video, our recap video, and so much work had gone to it. You had all your extracurricular, you were working on your serving for tennis, you were working on your math, but
not enough, but yes.
Even at that time, I was so impressed by your initiative. And I must have told you at the time that, Chirath, I think you will be a future leader of the school. And your response to me was, I am just a humble follower. And that was so mature of you.
Did I say that?
You did. You said, in fact, that's on text. You said, I'm just a humble follower.
I think I remember that. Yes, yeah.
So a year later, we then talked about what books or TED Talks inspired you. And the book that you mentioned was Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek.
Yes.
Do you still remember reading that book and how that had inspired you? And what is
it? It was, oh goodness, that was a long time ago. And I've watched a lot of Simon Sinek's videos as well. And I think the very common theme, and it's a theme that I center my leadership around, and Aidan centers his leadership around, and leadership in general at Saints, is that it's service, right? The concept of leaders eating last is that, not necessarily that you have to be at the end of the row all the time, but rather your goal is service, and it's service to the nth degree. And that was very critical to the way that I went about doing all these clubs and societies, because it wasn't always with the vision of, look, this will help me become a prefect in year 12. It was just, heck, this is fun to do because it puts a smile on people's faces. and it's fun to do because it's meaningful. And you know that's very central to me personally, and I think it was very central to people like you and to a lot of our leaders right now. And with truth, respect, and service, with service being such a big part of the school, year 10s with having to do 20 hours of service as part of their education, their holistic education, that's key. So that was, that book solidified that to me at a young age. And I think my dad told me to read it, and I was like, no, I don't want to read this book about leadership. I want to read the Lord of the Rings and stuff. So, which is what I was really into in year 7. But I remember flicking through it, reading parts of it, and eventually finishing it. And there wasn't a lot at year 8 that I understood from it, because a lot of it is related to a lot of very corporate concepts of leadership in business and leadership in wider society. So it was a lot of things that I didn't really understand. But on a more very washed off general level, that was the message that I took home and still hold very highly today.
That's great, Jen. I do. The reason why I asked that is I want to talk about leadership styles and just ask kind of how your leadership style have evolved. I've actually I've cheated a little bit. I've got my own notes here and with the text, and I asked you, Chirath, at the time, why was that book? Why did you recommend me that book? And you said he was a very inspiring guy who has understood the modern millennial demographic very well. Obviously, this was you a few years ago, but do you feel like with COVID and how things have changed, that there's an increasing need for educators, or parents, for senior leaders to understand this new kind of generation coming up? And if so, how are they different, and how do you actually relate to them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being a teenager today is like nothing you would have imagined it to be like years ago, right? We are constantly plugged in. And I don't mean that negatively in a way that like, oh, get off your phone, kids. I mean that, even subconsciously, inactively, we are constantly in the feed, right? Whether it is through the conversations with our friends, whether it's what we see on TV or what we talk about at the dinner table, there's a lot of priority put on what do I look like, right? What am I marketing out to the world, right? And there's, I think, a lot less emphasis, unfortunately, put on who am I inside, deep inside, and how do I market that to the world? Not, what's trending on TikTok, but rather what I hold very highly of myself. And I think in the way that we prioritize leadership, it's, with that comes vulnerability, right? And with that vulnerability comes a lot of opportunity for people not to engage because of the fear that might create, stepping outside of your comfort zone or your friendship group, or your, very specific set of interests that might appeal to the masses, but do they appeal to you? And with that vulnerability, we have to understand that. And, at Saints, being a single sex school, one thing that we really value is the fact that we can delve really deep into what it's like to be a young man and a young boy, and have really sensitive conversations about it, to help people grow as global individuals. And so I think it is critical that we understand what you go through, what as an adolescent today, in order to allow us to create programs, to direct our leadership in ways that encompasses the stresses and what's popular and what's not, and with that communicating them in a way that's palatable and that's valuable and that acknowledges that vulnerability and acknowledges that to be okay and the norm. And so definitely I agree. And when I said that in year 7 about how Simon understood that, it is about stopping to reflect. It's about being able to put your own ego aside when you're leading a group, and not just give them a bunch of directions, but to see who are the people that are here, what are they interested in, what makes them tick, what makes them afraid, what pushes them to their boundaries, and how can we create an environment that is inclusive and supportive of that. And that's always key. And I remember speaking about that in my interview for this job, actually. But yeah.
That's wonderful, Sharath. Great reflections and wonderful sentiments. The reason why I remembered that leaders eat last so fondly, and that's why I really went to search back for that text, was when I was in year 10, I went on the 21-day camp, and I was very lucky to have the then school captain, Hamish Lipp, on camp. And he was quite a role model. I looked up to him. He did the IB, which was what I wanted to do and end up doing. He was sporty. He, did big band, did his music, and he did his public
I love
speaking,
Hamish. It was
which
fantastic.
he inspired me to do as well. Just that holistic all-roundedness and just general cool guy, just someone
Yeah, yeah.
to be like. And on camp, after like a day of cycling or hiking, there's often not enough food for a group of 15, 15 boys, young men who are very hungry.
Yeah.
And the thing about him that stood out was he never went in line for the food. He always just sat there, waited till the end, and took whatever was left over.
Yep.
And what often happened was, because people had gone first, people always take that little bit extra, and by the time that he got there, he only had a little bit. And by about day 5, I think most of us realized, well, actually, Hamish isn't getting his fair share of food. And it was amazing that from then on, me and a bunch of others were always like, well, Hamish, why don't you go first? Why don't you go first? And even then he said, I'm here to serve. I'm here, I it's about you guys. And I thought that was a lesson that I really took away, where servant leadership isn't about you being at the front of the line. It's actually about you ensuring that everybody around you is flourishing and doing well. And that's why I love that book. And I think those are the very qualities that you seem to take a lot of pride in for your leadership too. How have you found your interactions with younger boys in your prefect year and currently in your captaincy? Because that was like my highlight. Like,
Yes.
amazing.
Your infinite handball matches with the junior school boys. Admittedly, Aiden and I haven't been able to go down to the junior school as much in term 1 because of all of the prep for the student association. So term 2, that's very high on our priority list. But in my prefect year in 2021, one of the experiences that I hold really fondly, and this was not just in my prefect year, it was also in year 10, 11, and 12, was coaching our house's junior house debating team. So the junior house debating competition, for context, is a competition just for the juniors of the senior school. So year 7, 8, and 9. And it takes places in your house, and all 10 houses will compete and have debates. And at the end, there'll be a grand final. And after I'd finished being eligible to be in the team after year 9, I started coaching the boys in year 10, and especially in year 12 as well. That was really special to me. And I think what it gives the younger boys is the confidence to know that their voice is heard even as a year 7, and their voice is heard by a senior boy. And whether you're wearing a white blazer or not, whether you're a prefect or not, that's really powerful. And it's something that we send home to the seniors quite often, is that you guys are setting the standard as to what's acceptable and what we value here at Saints. And that resonates in lots of high schools. So for me, that's a really big example that I like to reflect on, because those boys were initially very afraid to chime up in the debating meetings, to offer their perspective, to offer their ideas. And some of them had just started, never debated before, so were nervous, were shaking with their cards on the first debate. And then as we went on, you saw them become way more comfortable. And it just came with being there, acknowledging it as a senior, and saying, listen, I've been there, I've done that, and I can't pretend to understand what you're going through as well. I won't pretend to do that, but I've experienced similar, right? And I'll tell you the ways that I've been able to overcome these things and find the confidence to overcome them. And it's a bit of a mentorship kind of thing that comes out of it. And the best part is, after you have all these things, I still see Jacob Sweet, who's year 10 now, I think, goodness, or year 9. and he'd been in the team for I think 2 years, and they'd still come up and say hello, and still remember all the meetings and all the banter you'd have and the laughs. And it's about, and as a senior especially, it's about destroying the hierarchy. It's about getting rid of I'm year 12, you're year 7, listen up, right? It's sinking down to what's trending right now, what's the video game of choice, is it Fortnite again, or are you playing Flappy Golf these days? And it all comes down to just being a nice person and just being there to listen to these kids and just form friendships. And I think it's, friendships aren't exclusive to age group. And in those settings, it's fantastic when you start to have a laugh with these little year sevens, and you start to form relationships, and you start to build trust in the fact that, all right, David or Chirath, they're not just here to get over and done with debating. This is part of growth as a house, growth as a Saints boy, and just about having experience. And that's what I found really valuable as a year 7 as well. And as a middle years boy, seeing the senior boys, getting to know them on a very personal level was fantastic, and something that I hold very highly as well.
Gratitude is something that I've always admired about you, Chirath. And, since when I met you in 2016, you've always updated me with your stuff. And I'm sure that you've updated the people, other people too. Do you make it a habit to acknowledge the people who used to be a part of your life? And why do you do that?
Absolutely. And, in that little bio you read out at the start, there's a little thing about valuing introspection and perspective. And, through year 12, those two things were what got me through the year. And, when you were on 5 hours of sleep some days, you had a million different things to do. You had your prefect duties, your academics, your co-curricular, up to your knees, up to your head in significant assessment tasks. Being able to sit down and think, I'm very lucky to have the support that I do, that introspection and that perspective, and then being able to sit there and say, I might be stressing out, like I might be sweating bullets right now, but in 3 weeks, in a year, I'm going to be looking back on this like, goodness, look at how much I was stressing out for apparently no reason. And I always had that perspective. Like, if there was a maths test coming up, I'd be like, listen, in 10 years, you're not going to be thinking about that maths test. So let that calm your nerves. But the way that I've used gratitude as kind of a vector to appreciate where I am. And I think that's also thanks to the fact that I had, the experiences in rural Victoria, and coming from small schools and coming to a massive place like Saints. Instantaneously, you're like, there's so much to do, and I'm thankful to just be here and just to waft through. Even if I'm not actively engaging, being on this Hogwarts-like campus is really, it's a real privilege. And I think sitting down, and it's something that we don't do enough. Like, even I don't do it enough at all. Sitting down and just saying, thanks, mum and dad, for working as much as you do. Like, my dad works 300 kilometers away in Port Augusta, and spent so much time pursuing opportunities to send me to Saints, right? And my mum for driving me to tuition classes at 7 p.m. during the winter, in the dark, in the rain, waiting in the car for an hour and a half until the tute was over, for me to come home again. And all in all, just supporting you through that. And whether it was the teaching staff at Saints, I still hold individuals like Mrs. Brecky, Mrs. Daziani, Mr. Tickner in year 7 so highly, because they were there to just accept me as me and to find ways that I could do better in those subjects or in those areas. And I think what you'll find is, once you start digging deep into that introspection, is that you find a lot of things to be happy about, and a lot of things to be proud about, and a lot of things to be thankful for. And I think all those three things are such good roots to mindfulness, and such good roots to finding yourself as well and what you value. So almost in that way, I think is incredibly important and incredibly central to me taking up another year to do school captaincy. that was just about gratitude. That was just about me being, this place has helped me develop my character. I want to do something to pay the place back. What can I do about it? Let's have a crack at this school captaincy thing. And every day I walk onto campus now, I park my car at the front of the school in Hackney Road, in the Hackney Street gates, and I walk along the edge of Main Oval in front of the Pentreath building, in through Old School House, through the main doors in the middle, and then up to the captain's office. And that walk every day, I'll find myself sometimes standing there taking pictures of the place and just standing there and looking at it and thinking, this has given me so much, right? Saints has given me so much. And I then feel like I have a duty to do something for Saints. And I think that's something that Aidan and I both share this year. And I think that's the power of gratitude. It'll unlock something in you. And I think if we all take a little more time out of our lives to just stop and appreciate having a roof over our heads, having a meal every day, that's something that lots of people don't have. And it's crazy that you don't realize that until you stop to think about it. And I think that's so powerful, what that can do for you and how that will realign your values. So that's a very long-winded way to answer your question, but it's something I'm definitely proud about and something that I'll hopefully continue to do at a greater capacity.
It is absolutely beautiful, and that is why people take on this additional gap year, because we've all received so much from this community, so many opportunities, so many of the people and the anecdotes. And that's why if you look at my photo wall behind me, so much of it is from Saints, and I have nothing but good things to say about that community. And it's such a great feeling knowing that the school is in such great hands with you and Aidan, and I'm sure that you will inspire the next group of leaders to come along. In fact, when you mentioned about your mum waiting in the rain, I think that's actually how I met her. Is her name?
Oh, really?
Indy. Indiwari.
Indiwari, that's her full name, yes.
Yeah, no, I believe we met, well, it was a rainy day in term 2.
Yeah, right.
It was just there, and I thought, wow, that's Chirath's mum. How awesome. But anyway, that's very off tangent. So for younger boys now who are aspiring to achieve things at Saints, to be a captain of a sport, leader of a musical ensemble, to get good grades, what advice would you give them beyond just the theoretical things like get involved, or like, are there tangible, practical tips that you have learnt through your time at Saints?
Yes, and they're difficult. And what they are, and I say this often in terms of in my leadership, one thing that I like to do is prioritize how people feel, and then you have the outcome. They're like two things. You prioritize the outcome, or prioritize how people feel. And what I've discovered is if you prioritize the way people feel about the outcome, you'll actually get a better outcome in the end, instead of just from the very get-go saying, this is what we want to achieve, this is the outcome, we want this, instead of just being like, okay, so what do we do about this? How do you feel about going about this? What is your opinion on it? So I think in general, and again, it all falls down to introspection and being able to delve deep into yourself, to understand what you value and where your weaknesses are and what your strengths are,
you mind
and
if
how you can get that out.
Just because you mentioned vulnerability, and I think it's very powerful for a leader to, what are your weaknesses that you're trying to work on?
Sorry?
What are some of your weaknesses that you are trying to work on, or that you have either overcome or that you're trying to work on?
So one thing I've realized in this role right now is being able to say no sometimes. And sometimes just taking a moment to acknowledge how I'm feeling as well is a real challenge. And, I talk about introspection and I talk about the value of it, but on a day-to-day basis, it's tricky to do, right? And so for me, and in addition to that, it's being really confident to voice how I feel. even if it is, even if I feel like I'm talking against the curve completely. And that's something I've had a genuine fear for a long time, is not to say what might be the right answer, right? It's just saying what I'm saying how I'm feeling. And that's something I'm working on right now. Every day, it's just, here's my idea. It might be absolute garbage, but I'm going to let it out there instead of just we're sitting back and just, feeling transient. So that's something I'm working on for sure.
Great. Back to the question about practical tips. Go on.
Yeah. So if we can all get better at sitting down and grab a pen and a piece of paper and writing down, what is it you want to achieve? What are you good at? What are you bad at? Where can I actually improve? And then this is the really key important part. It's seeking that assistance. And the real tangible thing that you can do, I think, in any field, whether it's in sport, in music, in academics, it's not being afraid to acknowledge you're rubbish at something or you need improvement in something, and then actually going and seeking that help. And I remember in year 12, poor old Miss Reed with English, I went up to her and, just, is this good? Am I doing this correct? I'm worrying about this, and just completely all the time, because I was confident enough to do that, understanding that it'll only lead in growth. And it's not actually just a reflection of, oh, I'm bad at it. And I think that if the younger boys, and if anyone listening can be really confident to just put their hand up and say, I don't know, right? I don't know what's the answer. I don't know how to improve, or I don't know what to do in leading up to the Intercol game. Hopefully that's not where you'll be sitting at. But if that is, right? And I think what that shows is, firstly, a willingness to grow, right? And an understanding of yourself. That's really critical. And I think those things are critical in leadership, right? Growth is incredibly critical. And being able to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to put your foot out of the square to find them. And how you do that matters. And I think that's the real tangible thing that was really difficult for me at the start. I hated not knowing things. And I think that's because I've always been competing with my dad to know the right answer to things. And I'd be like, no, I think you're wrong. I think I'm right. This is why. I've done the research, Dad. And then dad being dad and knowing everything would simply just knock me out of the park. So, but afterwards, being comfortable and having had student leaders and staff tell me there's no such thing as a silly question, which some places, they don't tell you that. And, no question is a stupid one. The only way you will learn and grow is by knowing what you don't know. And that's step one, right? And then the tangible step is then going and seeking the help. And I think that's just key, especially in high school.
Indeed, having that self-awareness and also that courage to reach out to people, because we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. And
exactly
and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, but I don't tend to see weaknesses as weaknesses anymore. And likewise, I don't see strength as strength anymore, because I feel like every weakness has a corresponding strength, and every strength has a corresponding weakness. So for example, if you're incredibly organized, like you schedule out your day, so that's a good thing, right? You're organized, you never miss a beat. But a potential weakness to that is you may be less creative because you don't let spontaneity come into your mind.
Yeah.
So I think having that mentality where if I can just be honest with myself, even a weakness can have a corresponding strength.
Absolutely.
And even procrastination. I realized that I'd always been like a precrastinator. Like I love just getting work done ASAP, weeks and months before the deadline. But what I realized was that's actually quite limiting, because then you don't allow yourself the time to think and to think over things and to reconsider perspectives. And hence I changed my behavior where I will get started early, but I will intentionally procrastinate so that I force myself to think and let it sit at the back of my mind. And I think all of those things.
You're just too good, David. Imagine intentionally procrastinating. That's amazing. That's fantastic.
No, sometimes there's no luxury of that time. But no, it's really interesting hearing about your reflections, and I want to talk about the future with you, and in particular your future, because this podcast is very much about the guest and it's about you. Medicine is where you signed up to. When did you want to do medicine? How old were you?
How old was I?
Or when did you start thinking about medicine, and why was that the case?
I think I started thinking about it. I started thinking about it young, mainly because my father is a doctor, and in the ethnic community which I'm from, I'm from coming from Sri Lanka. Lots of people in that community trying to seek success choose one of three professions. You're a doctor or a lawyer, or you work for the government, right? So it was always at the back of my life in any way. And my mum's a nurse, so it's always there. And if anything, it was actually a deterrent for me. If anything, I was like, I don't want to subscribe to that. I want to go see what I enjoy doing. And I'm very thankful that my parents allowed me to have that freedom to just find what I'm good at. And I think it was probably around year 10 or year 9 or 10. And it was actually between being a director for film, right, with the whole background of doing stop motion things, and medicine, right? Those are kind of like the two avenues that I saw. And, I sought advice, and I remember speaking to Mrs. Daziani about it. And I've been thinking, why not both, right? There's no limitation besides time, unfortunately, to pursue that. And medicine for me has always been something that I think is, again, one of those things that is very selfless. And, speaking to a doctor right now, they sacrifice a hell of a lot. And, I reflect on what my dad does and the amount of time he spends away from home. But, on net, the amount of fantastic good that he does. And that just goes for anyone. And even if it's just giving people a glimmer of hope in, the worst parts of their lives when you're suffering from a health condition, like when that happens, even, David, when you have that sudden little chest pain and you think, oh, it's all over, right? The lights go out now. But it's just one of those random aches you have. But it's in that moment that you start to stress about everything. You start to think about, well, if death is at my doorstep, what's next? Who am I leaving behind? What are people going to think? And you have all of these emotions in your head. And, through allied healthcare and through doctors directly, helping ease that, I think is magical. And someone who's valued that interpersonal connection and also been a massive nerd, I think it's a win-win situation for me. But then I also don't envision it being a limitation to all the other things I want to do. Like film is something I'm seriously considering, pursuing at some capacity, right? But it was probably around year 8, year 9 that I was pretty determined on trying for it and putting the work in.
Do you feel like there is a culture or a pressure at Saints to try for medicine, then law, then engineering, then you're a disappointment to your parents?
I don't necessarily think there's a pressure to do them. I just think that by virtue of the success that we see at Saints, and that the academic muster you see at the end of every year,
it's all like, every year, you get 10-20 people back, and 80% of them would do medicine.
Exactly. So you've got that kind of implicit, well, this is what the boys have done. So I don't think there is a pressure put on the boys, but I think there's just a general understanding that success and doing well is the norm, right? And seeing all these boys come back, and over the years, that just kind of gels in, and you just see these people who do exceptionally well on the stage often, and you understand that that doesn't have to be your goal. Your goal can be anywhere you want to put it, but at Saints, wherever your goal is, you can achieve it. So I think the pressure that's put on the students, if at all, is to put your heads down, to find what you love, and to not be afraid to commit to it, and understanding that the resources are there for you to use to seek that success, not just as an individual, but as a collective team. but it takes the initiative to step out and actually reap the benefits from those resources. And that weight of expectation in that regard is very palpable. But no, not necessarily. I don't think there's a pressure to do those careers, but I think there's a pressure to do your best and a pressure to understand that it is absolutely okay to want to do well and to find ways to want to do well.
I think you're a unique case well, not unique, but because your father is a doctor, you have seen, and in that case, I think you would have made a very informed decision, and having weighed the costs and benefits, knowing someone as reflective as you. And I think it suits you really well. Indeed, you are a very generous person, very giving, and I can see you making a real tangible difference while having that intellectual stimulation and the kind of the patient kind of relationship building, which I think you would really, really enjoy. And
I'm quite excited.
Yeah, I also love how you still want to continue your film, and that was actually something we talked about at the Grace Tame talk.
Yes, yeah.
I think saying you were going to be a mini Ali Abdul.
Yeah. YouTube channel. I might be in your position, start a podcast, all this stuff. So,
but how do you see that complementing one another? Because often I feel like people have quite a fixed mindset on this is going to take time away from that, so that they have a very finite view. And in fact, Simon Sinek is someone who advocated for an infinite mindset. Do you envision those two to complement one another, whether professionally or personally?
That's the thing, where does film and medicine overlap, right? Or where do my other interests in medicine overlap? And I think music is a really good example that I can use. I've already spoken with people who are like third years in med school here in Adelaide to join bands and to actually start things up. And I think that in year 12, it's probably when I rationalized it best, right? Because I had my goal of medicine, and I had, you go online, this is the scores you need, you have to do the interview, all these things, and it's very competitive. And if you don't get in, you'll have to do a year 13 and do all this stuff again. And it's a lot, right? But then even amongst that, I still decided to take time out of my academic life to do school prefect duties, to do extracurriculars, to really pursue music and the rock band to the nth degree. And I think that if you genuinely have a love for something or a desire to do something, the time that it takes away or contributes becomes meaningless, because the thing you receive by advocating for it or by subscribing to that is worth far more than the time you spend doing it. And I think if there's something that genuinely sparks your interest and genuinely adds meaning to your day-to-day, do it. Even if it means you're taking time out from your professional life or out from wherever else you subscribe your time to, it's going to be meaningful. And I know it's going to be stressful, and it will be stressful. And it definitely was for me in year 12, still keeping up with all these different avenues. But I reflect on it now and thinking, I could have done way, way better academically than what I did, right? And I know that. And I know that partly came from the time that I spent, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I would have still done all the same things. I would have done more if I could have. And that's where it comes from, that just not being afraid to say, I love doing it, so I'm going to do it, right? And it's very difficult when you're entering career pathways that are very locked in. Psychologically, you think, okay, this is the pathway. But what we forget is, you're writing the story and the pen is still in your hand and the pages are blank, right? You see professional athletes who go to med school, but will stretch out the course for many, many years to balance their high performance activities. That's someone rewriting the story, right? That's someone who's going against the curve to do what they enjoy and pursue a career that they enjoy. And I think that's what we should all aim for. Maybe not in that same level, but even if it's at the most finite levels of pursuing an instrument or film, whatever it is, you'll find ways to incorporate that. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to to still pursue them, even if it seems strange. Like, why are you a doctor holding a camera or whatever, right? Or have interest in that area. And I think it's, just write your own story. Just the pen is still in your hand. That's something that I still really, really feel confidently about. Like, do not be afraid to principally and unequivocally be yourself and to just pursue what you love, because nothing adds meaning to life more than that. Like, on your deathbed, you're not going to be stressing about, oh, I could have put more hours into this or that, but you would be thinking the memories you made, the experiences you had, and the legacy that you leave is all based on what you do with your time. And don't be afraid to do it and subscribe your time to the things that you love. Just principally, full stop. That's me.
That's wonderful, Chirath. And just building on that, I guess the transferable skills that you can develop through those activities will actually complement other areas like academics.
Absolutely.
The basketball, the teamwork, the discipline, the resilience. It very much, helped me prepare for year 12 and the challenges and the ups and downs, or the music, the
Absolutely.
the public speaking, just being bold. I think it's, the boys at Saints do genuinely have such a wonderful opportunity to get involved, and they would not regret putting themselves forward. I think you articulated
absolutely
that beautifully. Chirath, is there anything else, any other topics about you that you may want to discuss that means a lot to you? What do you really value that perhaps we haven't yet touched on?
It's a tough question. We've spoken about a lot of them. I think we've relatively covered all bases, to be honest.
Good. In that case, I might just end with 3 questions.
Sure.
Firstly, what is the biggest misconception about you? Because you are in the spotlight. People do have perceptions about the role and about you, and they never see the full you, and that goes with everyone. So what are some things that you think people misunderstand about you?
I think it's one thing that people probably misunderstand is that because I'm confident on stage and confident by the lectern, that's something I always carry on, and that I'm show no nerves, or I'm just this good at public speaking. But behind that, every muster, if I have to speak, I'm always very nervous and I'm always a bit shaky. And I think it always comes down to the misconception being, just because you are good at something doesn't mean you still have challenges all the time to deal with it, and opportunities to grow and become better. And I think that's a pretty big one for me, is that I still have a lot of growing up to do, right? And I still have a lot of things I'm terrible at. Even if I walk onto stage with this white blazer on, I'm nowhere near perfect, right? And there's nothing about me that should really say that. And I know the easiest way to do that is when giving a speech, you muck it up completely. And sure, I may not have done that before, but it doesn't mean that I haven't done that outside of that arena. And there's still a lot of hard work that goes into preparing for that. And that's the same for everyone. Like, you should not be afraid to admit that and work to improve yourself. So there's just so much I don't know. And then I think Hot Cross Buns fundraiser was where that really hit home. Dealing with vendors so specifically, and being able to organize a try booking, sorting out where the funds are going. Like, I was so out of my depth. And and it was one of the real times in this year where I felt super overwhelmed. But I thought, I can either pretend to be the guy who goes up on stage every Thursday, who knows what he's doing, who he's good at public speaking, or I could admit I don't know what the heck is going on and ask for assistance. And I think yet again, that hits back home to seeking support when you need it. And I can't be more thankful to the staff at Saints for helping me out during that period of time, and the prefects for helping out during the last week of term 1. It was the most difficult, and where I was definitely the most out of my depth.
What's the most meaningful act of kindness you have ever given or received?
Ooh. I think it goes back to that that instance during the headmaster's leaving ceremony, and this was straight afterwards, and I'd butchered it, right? I'd butchered the line, I'd missed the line, and I knew that. And there was some of my friends who was like, "Oh, well done, Chirath, you missed the entire line," and we were all laughing about it. But then there was a senior boy who was a year 11 or 12. I had no idea who this guy was. He just walked up to me out of nowhere and said, "Hey, are you the kid who did the reading?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Good job, well done," and just walked off. Right. And I still don't know his name. I still don't know who he was. All I know is I think he was in Far House, but he was a senior, a year 11 or 12. And I was like, knowing that I butchered that means a lot. And I think that was like the most like random act of kindness, at least during my schooling, that I really remember. And that's something I've received, something I've given. That's very difficult. I'm not sure. I think back to maybe community day, just a couple weeks ago, and stopping to talk to a friend I knew was struggling. And I was very hesitant to do that because I didn't know enough about what was going on to make a meaningful conversation out of it or to try and help him. But I think, not with any intention of, "Oh, look at me, I'm coming here to talk to you." But I just sat down and had a conversation with him. And it was really nice. It was just a nice conversation to have with this young man who, had a few ups and downs during year 12 and was finding ways to cope with his life and his workload. And, we found a lot of similarity in that, which I didn't think we would find. And it was just one of those spontaneous moments where you take a step back and think, wow, it was just beautiful being able to do that. So maybe that was kindness in the act, but I think it was just having a conversation with anyone can make a big difference.
Final question, Chirath. How do you, so I guess two parts to it. Firstly, how do you measure your progress in life, how well you're doing, and that could be in any context, just overall? And second part of it was, when you're 40, 50, how will you measure your life? How will you know that you have lived a life that you're satisfied with, and whether there are things that you feel like you need to achieve or to do to make it a success, that if you don't do them, achieve them, that you will regret it?
Wow. Okay, that's a question. I think, so what was the first part of that question?
How have you been measuring your life, and how do you know what kind of progress you're making or how well you're doing? Do you have any metrics, and how do you judge your life at the moment?
Coming out of high school and finishing all the academic stuff, it's you have those quantitative metrics of how you're going in terms of your grades. But I think for me, kind of seeing where progress is being made, it falls down to how I feel about what I'm doing. And if it comes down to the fact that in year 12, it's probably the best I've ever been at maths in my life, right? I was doing really well in the tests, and it mainly, yes, the metrics showed me something, the numbers showed me something, but I was feeling confident for once. And I think in any aspect, the way I kind of see me making progress is, how am I feeling about what I'm doing? Am I finding my feet? And if I'm not, am I okay with it? Am I seeking the support? Am I feeling more confident as I go on? And am I, in reflection, learning something from it? And reflection, something that I do all the time, and something I enjoy doing because it allows me to rationalize each step I take, and it allows me to plan my path forward from the things that I've done, see where I can improve, where I can find more, gratitude and more fulfillment in what I do. And the second part of that question, which is, when I'm 40 or 50, how do I know? What was it? If I'd
So what are some things that you would have, if you hadn't done or achieved, you probably would think at the time that you haven't had a good life or that you would have regrets? Like, how will you look back and judge your life?
I think down the line, and more than anything, like more than my career aspirations and all of that, is to be able to have a very supportive network of people. And when I'm 40 and 50, if I can see and surround myself with like-minded individuals who it's a reciprocative relationship where we both give and take from one another, and it's just that feeling of warmth when you're around someone you can just be yourselves, whether that's around your kids and your family and your friends. That's my yardstick, right? And to be able to hopefully one day have a family of my own, and to just be that dad who takes into consideration all the time how my kids are feeling, not how they're doing in school, because that's always connected, right? It's not just about what are your grades, son. It's just about, how are you feeling every day? And I think that's something we don't ask enough. And I think traditionally it's something that we don't do. Like being a friend as a father, whilst also being a father, is really important to me. And it's something that I think when I'm 40 and 50 will really prioritize in my family and amongst my friends and colleagues, that we do take the time to acknowledge we're human, to just form these warm environments where we can feel safe, supported, acknowledged, appreciated. And I think that's seriously, I can't think of any other way to measure my personal criteria of success in life than that, than to have genuine experiences and memories to talk about.
That's wonderful, Chirath, and we will make sure we keep this piece of recording to look back on. And I'm very confident knowing you that you will be striving and you will look back with great pride. But Chirath, we talked a fair bit about, what younger boys can learn from older students, etc. But I also just want to say thank you and share my gratitude. And I, as a senior, so as a younger student at Saints, I learned so much from the role models. But as a senior student, I also learned a tremendous deal from the younger students, seeing how they approach things, their creativity, their smile, their kindness, their innovation, their sense of humor.
Yeah.
I think that is the most beautiful part about the Saints communities, their inter-year level relationships. It's the parents who volunteer and give up their afternoons and weekends, who volunteer for the music concerts, who stack their chairs. It's the teachers who go above and beyond and draft their assignment in their holidays.
Infinitely, I know. Yeah.
So it is everybody. And Chirath, you are undoubtedly someone who had a big influence on my life as well. And I learned so much from you, from your attention to detail, from your initiative, just from your attitude where you're always seeking to acknowledge other people. And
thank you, David.
on that note, Chirath, I really just want to thank you. And I'm so happy that someone like you and Aidan as well is currently leading a community that means a lot to me. And I know that the younger voices here would learn a great deal from you both.
Thanks so much, David. That means so much. It was very heartfelt of you. Thank you. And it's the same from me as well. Although I didn't have a lot to do with you during your captaincy year, when you were in year 11 and when we were doing all that we did with Huntington's, seriously, you're one of the people that we held in high regard. And even amongst all the boys, and I still speak to boys like Gabe, who was who wasn't at Saints in the end, who ended up moving off. But we still remember very, very fondly all the fantastic things that you did for us, and the opportunities you provided for us. So it's a two-way street here. It's a lot of mutual respect, and that we have a long way to go. And I hope that these conversations will still prosper as we go from here and still stay in contact, undoubtedly. So I'm very, very thankful you did. Often we have old scholars who we did things with and we were part of, but we don't hear from them afterwards. But you always made a very deliberate effort to put that odd comment on the Instagram post or whatever it was. So Truly, it's something that we appreciate, and it's, we role model many of the things that you've done. So thank you as well.
Lots of love for you guys. Thank you so much, Chirath, and all the best for term 2. I look forward to following your updates.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.